Well, good morning. We're continuing on in our study of Revelation. We're in Revelation chapter 6. Currently, we have gone over, at least in passing, the beginning of the seals, and I think we've reached up to the fourth and fifth seal, essentially, so that we're able to look at these and look at them in a little more depth and to know what they mean and what they represent for the future. Not necessarily us or those of us who are saved here, but the future in general. We've seen, and my dad mentioned that I have this thing up here and I haven't mentioned it at all. It's because I'm not used to it in this setting, at least. But it's a little bit of a visual cue that helps us understand where we were and kind of how the Revelation is laid out. As you can see, the Revelation 1:19 tells us what basically the book is about. The things thou hast seen, which is basically chapter 1, which is the vision. The things which are, which is the churches, which are right now. And then the things which shall be hereafter, which is basically chapter 4 through the rest of the book. We have gone through God's throne room. We've seen John's vision. We've seen the 7 churches. We've gotten to now the seals and the tribulation judgment. So now we would say we are at the beginning of the tribulation period. We are in that moment where after the church has been caught up, we do believe that the church has been raptured already, and I believe that because of the verse that says, "Come up hither." And I believe that's chapter 4. Just got to make sure. Or is it right at the end of 4:1? Yes, 4:1 says, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard as it were of a trumpet talking with me," so we hear the trumpet sound, "which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee the things which must be hereafter." So we get the insight into now that, and you have to remember that John is the believer in this. John is your look into Revelation. So it is okay to put yourself in John's shoes, because that's his perspective of the things. He has to be told things. He has to be enlightened to things. He has to be asked to view things. And it's very interesting because there's some, I guess you could say, language nuances that I didn't notice before. As we see in the seals, it'll say, "Come and see," or the "Come up hither" that we've just read. And the fact that he didn't know everything. It's a very interesting idea that John has a limited view of what's going on and has to be told, like we do. He has, like when it mentions that the book, the scroll with the 7 seals is there, and he doesn't know what has happened, and he weeps because he doesn't understand and doesn't know who can open it. That's a very finite view of the future. But it's a very finite view of the future that I think we can understand, because that's how we live. I don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. I don't know what's going to happen 2 seconds from now. I just know, what I do know is for the next hour and a half my dad will speak. But I do, so I just know that John has a very interesting view of what's going on because he doesn't know. He's having to be told. He's having to be enlightened. He's not giving us the view that we're kind of used to. He's giving us the view of how it was revealed to him. That, oh, I had to get this told to me. I had to get this taught to me, because otherwise I wouldn't understand. So as we get to Revelation chapter 6, we see that the seals are being opened by the Lamb, by Jesus. We see that the first seal we know was the Antichrist. And it said in verse 1 of chapter 6, "And when I saw the Lamb had opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw and behold a white horse, and him that sat on him a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer." We know that crown is not the diadema, it's just a conqueror's crown. We saw the second seal, which was war, in verses 3 and 4, which was the red horse and bloodshed. And again he said, "Come and see." Verse 5 and 6, the third seal was famine. It was the black horse. We looked in Jeremiah and Lamentations of how the color black is attributed to famine, and how in Leviticus they also say they eat bread by weight in there as well. And then verse 7 and 8 begins the fourth seal, which is death. And we saw that in Revelation 1:18 and 20:14 that death and hell are together. And I believe that's where we left off last, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot to mark off where I talk, and I talk a lot, so I always have to remember to put a little mark of saying, oh, this is where I'm at. But it is good to go over these things. So I don't remember if you guys remember where I left off, that at the beginning of verse 9, so we get to the fifth seal, and we'll read 9 to the end of the chapter here in a little, but something disappears from the chapter. And it's very interesting, and I think it's very pointed, because of John's position and John's ability to know what's going on. So we'll read to the end of the chapter, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. And it says, in verse 9, it says, "And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given to every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren, that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. And I beheld, and when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" So we see here the fifth seal in verses 9 through 11, that we don't really know what the seal is. Truthfully, it's a little bit different. We know that the sixth seal becomes chaos, but it seems that the fifth seal is the martyrs talking. It is them wondering when they are going to be avenged, or when will they be brought back into the light. When is their justice coming? And it's very interesting that and it's different from most of the other seals, because we don't know what happens to the world here, or if anything happens to the world here. Every other seal has had something up until this point where the world has been affected, from the Antichrist, the war, famine, death, and then we get to this one, which is the martyrs, which is a little bit different. It also ends a very particular phrase that has been said up until now. And does anybody know what phrase isn't being said anymore? Come and see. Come and see isn't there. So I wanted to ask you, and I as I've studied this more, I've been more and more sure of my reasoning, and I could be very wrong, but I think I'm right, or I think the Lord has given me insight here. So why is the come and see not mentioned anymore? Why was the come and see having to be had to be mentioned up until this point? Why did he have to ask to see these things up until then? Does anybody have an idea? Which is okay if you don't. No? Dad? I know we cheated because we talked about it.
Well, first of all, we would have the understanding that he's in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are happening on earth. So that would be something, and it's almost like he was given permission to see things on earth that possibly he wouldn't be able to see before.
So I believe that's correct. So what he said was in summary, is that John has a finite view of what's going on. And we as Christians would not care what's going on the earth. Essentially. I mean, we would want to be knowing what's going on, but these tribulations and these seals, we're celebrating them opening. We wouldn't necessarily know the ramifications of what's going on. And he has to be asked to come and see. These are things happening on the earth. They're not privy to the information. It has a lot of other possible conjectures that you in heaven will not be able to see what's going down on things on the earth. I can't dogmatically speak on that, but he has to be asked to come and see about the things that are happening on the earth. He says, you have to be allowed to come see it. Come and look. Come and look. It could also be simply the fact that John is getting a view of heaven and doesn't really want to look at these things. It's not really a pleasant thing to look at. We've already seen that John has human emotions. We've already seen that John has the view of not knowing what's going to happen or not knowing the right answer to things. So it could be very hard to look at. It could be things that John didn't want to see. And he's like, no, you need to come look at these things. Come and look at them. Come and see them. So personally, I think it's more of the first one where he has to be invited to come look at them, because normally he wouldn't have the ability to, or normally he wouldn't want, or his position doesn't allow him to look. So his heavenly position as a saved and raptured individual means that he is not going to be part of this, but he needs to be invited to come look at it. So the ending of the come and see, I think, is very interesting, because then that what means for the fifth, sixth, and seventh seal means these are things involving heavenly bodies. And that seems to be the case, at least from what I've studied so far. So we see a shift here from the ending of the fourth seal, which is death, to now the fifth seal being things that are of heavenly minded, or heavenly natured. So that John wouldn't have to go looking for it. He could just turn and say, okay, this is happening right in front of me. And we'll see that a little bit more. As you read it, it says in verse 9, when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. So, where is the altar? It's kind of a easy lob question, but it's somewhere that we've already mentioned and already looked at. It's on the screen. It's in the throne room in verse 4. The altar has already been mentioned. So when an altar is meant for what? That's another easy question. Sacrifices. So the symbolism of these people who are under the altar, and again, let me just read it so I can make sure I say it right. When he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. So, what is normally under an altar after it's been slain? What did all sacrifices, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure every sacrifice required the one thing, spilling of blood, and that would pool down the altar. So, and at the bottom, that's where it would collect. The blood would collect there. So this is the blood of saints, or this is the symbolism of the saints, are the blood that are saying, we're collected here. We've been sacrificed for you. And it's very interesting, the placement of where they are, just at the bottom and being used. And now they ask some very hard but interesting questions that almost seems a little brash, but it's not. It's an honest question. In verse 10 it says, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? It's kind of a bold statement. And especially when talking to the Lord, and they do mention him that he's holy and true, but they ask, how long? How long? It's interesting that at least this is just where my mind goes. It's interesting that saints who are under the altar in heaven still have a concept of time. They know that they've been sacrificed, and now they're waiting for the judgment. They're waiting for the judgment of they were killed for a reason. So we know that they were killed because of who they were, or because of their Christianity, because of basically the way that they're mentioned here. It says under the altar, the souls were slain for the word of God and the testimony for which they held. Go ahead.
I'm still trying to grasp exactly what the seal is, and I know it's not said, but it's some type of judgment upon Christians. I wonder if they get blamed for the famine and, the wars. I wonder if the Antichrist in some way, with some great injustice, if that's the seal. And it's fascinating to me that I've always thought that the seals were judgments against unchristian, on the unsaved, and I would still think that that's true, but it's just a very different seal because of the manner of it. It's almost like they killed the innocent people, and that condemns them even more.
Mm-hmm. So what I have been able to deduce, or my dad said for those who are listening online, that this seal is different because every one before that is explicitly named towards the unbelievers or to the world. And then this one doesn't really mention the world at all. And then the next one does again. So we know that there is some sort of judgment here. And what his conjecture is that these people were slain because of what has happened in the previous 4 seals, and now are here, and because of their actions, they will be, I think the next seal probably definitely puts them in their place, understandably, but they are basically being primed of, what did you do wrong? Here's another thing that I can definitely point to, and then the next seal is going to say, now you're going to understand who you are, why you're being judged, and what the judgment is. So it is a very different seal, and it's one that seems hard to grasp, but I'm hoping that you'll see that with the right context, and I think that my dad was on the right path for why it is different, that these people were killed, and I believe that as well, that these people were killed in the line of from the other ones, that they were preaching the word. They were killed for their testimony. They were killed for the words that they were saying, or the position that they were holding. These people were martyred. And they are wondering when they're going to get justice. And I think that's a very human thing. We've talked at lengths about it in previous studies, that we're very cause and effect minded, that when something happens, justice needs to be served right now. We like to be the judge, jury, and executioner. We like to be the people who say, well, the wrong happened right now, so within the next 5 days, the judgment must be passed. And God basically shows here that that's not how I work. Judgment is on my time, not yours. So we'll get to see that the pause that he takes here and says, I will look at all the martyrs that is going on. I will look at what has been done to you. And he rewards them. He gives them the white robes in verse 11. It says, and white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were shall be fulfilled. So he gives them the white robes and then tells them, I need you to wait. because there's going to be more of you who are going to die for the cause, for preaching the word. We can kind of see that this is reminiscent of, and it's not, in the timeline, but it's kind of reminiscent of the previous message to the church at Sardis, if I'm not mistaken, where he told them that they were being persecuted and that they were under heavy attack, and he said that, there'll be a crown for you. You'll just, that's what you got. You just have to go through with it. So we see again this reaffirmation of this theme of hardship is coming for those who are the left, the people who do believe. So this also brings an interesting concept, or something that we've said before. So I want to clear this up. What is the timeline of these people? So the people who were killed are believers, correct? And so then my dad posed the question, are these people who were killed because of the seals being opened? So then that would mean that they would have had to have been saved during this as well, because the rapture had already happened, correct? If I'm making sure the timeline's still correct. So these are people who would, so there's, and it's not super clear here, but these are either people who were martyred through the course of history, or that saw these things happening and got saved and then were martyred. So it's a very interesting time period that me and you won't experience if you're saved, but people who get saved during the seals. And I think that that's who he's talking about. These people who were saw these things happening, understanding what's happening, and got saved, and then were martyred because of their beliefs, and now are asking, well, how long until we're avenged? What are we going to do? And it's really kind of a beautiful statement that he has to give them. And he gives them the white robes and just says, rest a little while. Just wait. It's a good, these people who are relatively new to the faith, I guess you could say, put that in quotes. They died for the cause, so I can't belittle their Christianity. But these people who are new, who are martyred and taken away so quickly, and now asking, how long do we have to wait? How long do we have to wait for your judgment? And it's interesting that God gives them a little leeway here. It says, here's your robe, just take a second. There's going to be more of you who are going to die, and I need you to just wait, because judgment will be served. Not on your time, but on my time. So what we see here is a shift from earthly things, from the fourth seal to death, to now heavenly things. So these are things that John could, instead of having to look down, or figuratively look down, to look over to see that the altar is there and this thing is happening, to the sixth seal, which we'll just start a little bit and talk a little bit about, that is another heavenly body. And it says, when he had opened the sixth seal in verse 12, and lo, there was a giant earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she's shaken of a mighty wind. So we see that this involves lots of heavenly bodies. He sees the sun, that it turns black, and the moon becomes as blood, and the stars of heaven are falling. And when the heaven departed, in 14 it says, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And said unto the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So my question is, why wasn't he asked to come and see? If this is correct, if my conjecture is correct, why isn't he asked to come and see?
Well, it says in verse 12, I beheld. So it's now got his full attention.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as if it starts in the atmosphere him. And then it goes further on, it says, heavens departed as a scroll in verse 14. So it's almost like it starts out in the universe and ends up on earth with a great earthquake. And it does say that he beheld it.
So I believe it resides soundly in verse 14, where it says, "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain of the island were moved out of their places." I believe that the barrier that was there, or that was there, has now been moved. And so why do these people hide, the people that are left on the earth? Where do they go? What are they hiding from? What is the seal that is broken? And I think that that's a very important thing to grasp about the end of this seal, or at least near the end of this seal. What are they hiding from?
It says in verse 16, the Lamb.
They're hiding from the face that sitteth upon the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. So I believe that from at least what it's been saying, that the heavens depart and the full gaze of the Lord is upon them. The barrier between heaven and earth has been pulled apart, and now they can see exactly who is doing this to them. So they do the only thing that humans can try to do in these situations, is they go to a cave, they go underground, they try to put a barrier between themselves and God. That is what they do. And they hid themselves. It's very cut and dry that as soon as that was happened, they went, we need to get out. We need to hide. We need to hide. There is no escaping the face of God, or the judgment of God in this. That He's lifted the barrier that was there before. And that's why I believe He could see, because the heavens had been rolled away. He was seeing the things that were happening. The heavens are parted, and now the wrath and face of God is directly on these people. And they do the only thing that comes to their mind, and that's run. Run and hide in the rocks, run and hide in the hills. And they say, "For the great day of His wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand?" That's a very interesting statement. The very end there, and we'll just cover just a little bit. Who is saying the great day of His wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? It's the people. It's the people who are hiding. It's the unbelievers. It's the people who are being judged. So, these people have knowledge of what's going on. They understand that the day of His wrath has come, and there's nothing they can do about it, except have believed before, I guess you could say. So we know that these people have been given the knowledge. These people have been given the situation of what's happening around them. They have been told what is happening. Nothing is blinded to them, because they understand that when this is happening, they know exactly what and who this is. And that's very interesting to me. And a lot of personal or just world natural disasters or anything happening, one of the first things that you hear is what's going on. One of the first things you hear is it's confusion. And at this point, there is no confusion. There is no mistaking what's going on. So these people understand, or at least if they understood, they might have been better. But these people realize what's happening. And I've never really thought of how specific that means. And I think in conjecture with the last portion with the martyrs, that I believe that these people were being told exactly what's going on. And then I believe those people were martyred for the cause in this time. So these people were being told the truth over and over and over and over again, even in the tribulation period. These people were being told what's happening among them and saying, hey, these seals and everything that's happening, this has exactly been told before. It's right here. It's right here in Revelation. It's right here. It's telling us exactly what's happening. This man who's on the white horse is not who you think he is. There's wars that should be happening, the famine, the death has all happened. And it's told us that it's right here. And then they were murdered for it. So that, and I believe they even went further and said, hey, the next thing that's going to happen is the moon's going to go to blood and the sun's going to go completely dark, and then the heavens are going to part, and you're going to know. You're going to know and understand what is happening. And it's going to be too late. And I find that that's chilling to me. That scares me. To know what humanity is capable of. In the face of absolute truth, we can still deny it. This isn't a time for them to take it and fall on their knees and say, well, Lord, save me now. That time has passed. They had their chances, and now they understand what's going. They know what's going to happen because they've been told for the last however long at this point, they've been told that this is exactly what's going to happen. So the understanding of these people, and it's everyone in the world, essentially, that's where it lays it out. Kings, great men, rich men, chief captains, mighty men, bondmen, and every free man and every bondman hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains. And they all say, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is to come, and who shall be able to stand? It's interesting that they'd rather be crushed by the mountains and the caves than face his wrath. They know what's happening. Do you have a question?
No, I just think that I think it's along the same line. You think of the Battle of Armageddon, and this is leading up to, or it's talking about that time. It's not something that's new, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not a Christian. Okay? If man's mind, I would say most men's mind know there's some climactic, something going to end everything. Okay? And knowing that, in fact, these scriptures say, hey, they knew what this was, and they ran from it. And that's just man. Man, you live not in the will of God, not a Christian or not a believer. And I thought another key word was the earth dweller. They that dwell upon the earth. What did they know? Well, they knew what the wrath of God was. This, where is it coming from? Where did they get that information? I just say it's on the heart of the wicked as well as the, sinners. I don't think they had to read the Bible to get that. I think God imprinted upon who they were.
I think like you said in verse 14, when the heaven departed as a scroll, I think that was a quite literally a sign saying, you know exactly who this is coming from. You know exactly. Go ahead.
Romans 1, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. They know. They know.
And he's going to leave no doubt in their mind. And I think that's especially the imagery of, I'm going to turn everything that you possibly can look to against you. And I'm going to part the veil between us. I'm going to roll the heavens back and look you straight in the face, and you're going to understand that it's me. And it's scary that that's how stubborn we can be. That's the extent. This is literally the extent of how stubborn us as a human nature, as a human race can be, is even in the face of God. Know who he is, know what is coming, know what's happening is from him, and wish the rocks to kill us instead, and not come in. So it just shows the extent of, you could almost say Revelation is a book about the extremes of humanity, that knowing what we will endure and knowing what we can and will come up against and seeing how we react. I know it's been, my dad's said it a couple times, but at least the small pandemic that we've been through has been eye-opening to know how we react in certain situations. Just what we go through and the tensions it puts the human race under, what it causes us to do in these times. And it's not going to surprise me at all how much more amplified that's going to be in the end times. Where instead of on a global scale, it's on a world scale. It's an even greater scale of death and famine and things of that nature, and how much more tension that the world will be under. But as we go into the 6th and 7th seals within the next couple weeks, we'll see, it's very interesting, the next couple chapters take like a pause and say a lot of things, and we see the 144,000 marked, and a little history or a little study session for you. There's a tribe that's not mentioned in there, and there's a lot of conjecture as to why. I don't know if I'll have an answer for you. I don't think I will, but there's a lot of things that are going to happen that I think is very interesting to look at. And sometimes we might not get the answers that we need, but we will be able to understand. So I think that's not the answers that we need, the answers that you want, but you will be able to know more about God. And I think that's what Revelation has taught me more than anything, is that Revelation teaches me more about who Christ is more than anything else, and instead of what I want to know. And that's obviously what the book is about from verse 1, from the revelation of Jesus Christ. So as we go forth, we'll see more about the 6th and 7th seals, and then we'll get into the trumpets, and timeline becomes really important, and that's when we'll start referencing this a little bit more. And I have another paper, I have another screen that we can go over, because it's not going to be chronological anymore. There's going to be some things that are going on at the same time. So it's going to be understandable, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So we'll try to help you out in that nature. Dan, if you don't mind closing us in prayer.